So let me jump into my buddy, Rashid Tabakawala. I've known him for years. It really is a bucket list moment for me to introduce him and to have him in one of my events. Rashad has been a senior advisor to Publicis Group. He spent 37 years there. I thought I spent 20 years there. It was a long time. I was just getting started compared to him, where he was the chief strategist for the entire group. I met him and listened to him countless times. Every time I listened to him, I learned something new. He's named by Business Week as one of the top business leaders in pioneer innovation of his time. Time Magazine dubbed him one of 5 marketing innovators of all time. He's Advertising Agency Hall of Fame first vote. He's received a Lifetime Achievement Silver Medal from the Chicago Ad Foundation. Here he comes. He's also written a book, which I found, and I think it's absolutely amazing, called Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in the Age of Data, which if you haven't read this book, you have to read it. It is a must read. He's also the chairman of the Tobaccowala Foundation, which helps 10,000 plus people in India with healthcare and education. And most recently, he's got a blog now called The Future Does Not Fit the Constructs of the Past. I'm sorry, the Containers of the Past, right? Right, Rishad?
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, the Containers of the Past, which in 4 or 5 months has had 3,200 members join that, right? So, all right, so that's it. He already jumped in because we're 3 minutes behind, and I'm gonna jump off. Rishad, the floor is yours. And just to let everybody knows, we've got Q&A set up, we've got chat set up. If you've got questions for Rishad, please ask. And if we don't get to all the questions, I'm going to try to monitor those. And if we don't get to all of those, I think Rishad has agreed to jump into our collaboration channel, and our networking channel, so you might be able to ask him some questions later on. Okay, that's as fast as I can talk. Rishad, the floor is yours. Thank you so much and really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that great introduction. Thank you for the opportunity, Michael. I can say I knew you when, now that you're running this big thing or leading this big thing. So I'm going to speak for about 18 to 20 minutes and then open it up for questions for the next 10. And broadly, my topic really is about how all of us, both as teams, individuals, and as companies, thrive in these transformative times, which I basically call the Great Reinvention. So prior to December 2019, there were 3 significant shifts taking place globally. And they've been going on for about maybe a decade or more. And a big part of my role as a strategist was to try to understand what the word strategy meant. And I sort of define it as future competitive advantage. 3 simple words, which is, what does the future look like? What will people want? What will companies want? Who will my competitors be? And against those competitors, what advantage can I basically provide? So strategy is simple 3 words, future competitive advantage. The world's best strategist is a gentleman called William Shakespeare. He's about 500 years dead, but he wrote in Julius Caesar, take the current when it serves or prepare to lose thy ventures, which basically means go with the flow man or go with the flow woman, which in other words is the trend is your friend. And if you're mediocre, but you get yourself into a good trend, you are likely to be successful. If you're world class and you're on the wrong trend, you're likely not to be so successful, which basically means being a great marketer of typewriters in an age of word processors doesn't work that well. So the trend is your friend. 3 big trends which are unstoppable, and each of you all, both individually for your firms and for your companies, I'm sure have aligned with them, but I would just remind you. The first trend is globalization. Globalization is completely unstoppable. It doesn't matter if our current president or the president or the prime minister of the United Kingdom or the prime minister of India try to be nationalistic. The reality of it is both all the greatest opportunities and the greatest challenges of the future are going to be global. I'm going to start with a simple letter called C. Think about China. That's both a global opportunity and an issue. Think about climate change, global opportunity issue, and think about COVID-19. It's global. So when anybody basically says the world is not global, I'd say, no. global is going to happen. And if necessary, the world will detour around people who are not open to globalization. So that's number one. Number two is demographic shifts, and they occur all over the world. If you basically are in Japan, the population is declining significantly, as it is in most European countries. Countries like China and India both will have lots of population. China's average age is getting closer to 40. India's average age is closer to 20. That makes a very big difference in the way the world works. In the United States, sometime in the next couple of years, everyone, or the United States under 21 will become a multi-ethnic society, which basically other people say it's Caucasian minority. I call it multi-ethnic. And this is everybody under 21 in the United States. So if you don't like people who are multi-ethnic, you have to kill everybody under 21. Building a wall doesn't help. So clearly demographic shifts are a big part of everybody's future. And the third one, not surprisingly, is technology. And we are about to enter the third connected age of technology. Technology has been around since the advent of fire, but the type of technology that is really impacting us isn't even online technology. And I was playing around with that when I first started some of the first interactive agencies in 94, 95. But really it occurred around 97, 98 with the advent of the World Wide Web. And the first generation was built around two things, search and e-commerce, of which Google and Amazon are the big players in the Western world. The second age began in 2007, and that particular age basically began with mobile and with social. So the first age was we were connected to transactions and connected to information. The second age, we were now connected all the time because of phones and connected to everybody because of social networks. We are now entering the third age, and please remember these build on each other so one doesn't replace the other. The third age, which began about 2 or 3 years ago, is built around 4 new forms of connection, which is going to impact business, the way business gets done, competitives, everything else. One is data connecting to data, which is AI. Machine learning is basically that. Much faster ways of connecting, which is 5G. New ways of connecting, which our voice is the first interface, potentially AI, AR and VR will be coming in soon. And then continuously connected to the great computer in the cloud, which is cloud-based computing. And if you think about the 4 or 5 companies that have dominated in market cap, whether it's Amazon, Google from the first age, Facebook, Apple from the second age, and a revitalized Microsoft in the third age, you begin to understand that we have entered this age. And by the way, it has occurred in your own home. So anybody who has a Google Home device or Amazon Echo basically got an instrument in their home that uses AI, uses voice, uses connection to the cloud. The only thing it doesn't use currently is 5G. It uses your wireless network. So clearly these 3 key shifts are where the future is. And for anyone to be successful, globalization, opportunities and threats from that, new third connected age technologies, and obviously making sure that demographic shifts are taken in account in everything from your marketing, from your talent base to how you work. And as you all probably know, more and more companies, Microsoft, and a lot of other companies are now making sure that there is multi-ethnic representation in all their supplier and other companies. So these are pretty significant. Obviously, these all occurred and were occurring and continue to occur, but then something happened in December 2019. And December 2019 or November 2019, something happened in Wuhan, which we are now living under, which is COVID-19. And a lot of people have basically spoken about COVID-19, and I've heard words like, this is the great pause, the great recession 2.0, the great acceleration. All of those are possibly and probably true. But I really do believe that what we are seeing is the Great Reinvention. What we're seeing is the Great Reinvention. So I worked in business for 40 years, so my experience is only 40 years long, which is somewhat good, but maybe not amazing, because in effect, I've not worked during World War II or the Great Depression. But in the 40 years I've worked, I've never seen anything like this, because unlike SARS or MERS, which was a health problem, or 9/11, which was a political problem, or the Great Recession, which is a financial problem. What we really have today is a financial problem, a social problem, a health problem, all occurring at the same time. That's one big difference with anything I've seen over the last 40 years. The second is this is the first time this is happening to everybody in the world, regardless of station and in every country. Even the Great Recession, actually 37 countries did not have a recession. So to a great extent, this is happening to everybody all at the same time. But the biggest change is it's happening for 6, 9, 12, and 18 months. And when anything happens, and one of the things I studied in my book is when something, people tend to have, most of us as human beings have inertia. We keep doing what we do till someone stops us, and it's very hard for us to get to start something new. But when people begin to start or stop doing something for 6 to 9 months, their behaviors change. And think about how your behaviors will change, whether it's conferences, traveling, events, eating out. It's not that you won't go back to eating out and you won't go to conferences and you won't travel, but it'll be different. You'll travel probably less. We'll move into a hybrid world. The things are going to be very different. And so this is sort of this great reinvention. I am going to basically share with you all a piece that I wrote, which is very popular in boardrooms of many, many companies. And I sort of jazzed it up. I usually write it in like a WordPress document, but this particular one was, or Substack, I got someone to sort of jazz it up. And so if you look at the chat, you'll actually see the article or the piece, which you can read if you're interested. I'm just going to take a section of that and apply it to a lot of what you all work on. Obviously, I'll work on a lot of different things, but one of the key things is how is companies going to change in this great reinvention? And basically, my belief is great reinvention is going to take place at 3 levels: the society level, the business level, and the individual level. And we're going to go through 3 phases. The first phase is the phase of fragility, where we all felt fragile. Then the second phase is resilience, which is how do we get strong again. And the third phase is resurrection. How do we reinvent? I'm going to talk basically about the resilience and the resurrection that I'm beginning to see in businesses all over the world. One of the really interesting opportunities, since I'm now a freelance sort of advisor and writer, a starving author and an advisor, I get to basically go from country to country, place to place, zoom in and out very much like you all do. And there are 5 things I'm seeing companies do. One is they're re-architecting to a smaller footprint. Whether it's Bob Iger at Disney, most companies are architecting into a smaller footprint. There are some that are different, technology companies, and today some big retail companies like Walmart, etc. But people are basically saying, how do we do more with less? Do we need all of these things? So that's number 1. Second is everybody is rethinking their supply chains. The key thing with the supply chain is that no longer are supply chains only going to be optimized on cost, but on resilience, which is, as you know, Wendy's ran out of hamburgers or beef. So somebody basically realized that you need to have resilience in supply chain. And so you can't have just one supply chain, which is either the lowest cost or one that's optimized. You need supply chain resiliency, and you're basically beginning to see that. The third is every business model is moving to becoming a hybrid or a mongrel model versus pure breed. There really is no digital only or direct to consumer only. There isn't any full-time or contractor. There's going to be this mix. So if you're a restaurant, and hopefully restaurants will keep staying in business, even the most fanciest restaurant, for instance, the fanciest restaurant in Chicago is a restaurant called Alinea. And Alinea is basically costs $350 for a 12-course meal without alcohol. What do they do now? They do pickup, delivery, pop-ups, everything. So every restaurant will have a combination of drive-through, pickup, delivery, and in place. So think about every business is going to basically have multiple channels as we move forward. The third is strong balance sheets will be cool again. I am basically seeing boardrooms, really looking at their balance sheet, making sure they have resilience in their balance sheet. And then, not surprising, there are brand new opportunities to create new companies, new products, new services. The simple rule that I suggest to boardrooms is the following. Remember this, and then I will open it up for questions. But remember this, 2008, 2009, right? So that's the closest we've had to something like this, which is the Great Recession. Again, it's minuscule compared to this, but it was big. What else was happening in the Great Recession? Around then was the second connected age that I mentioned, which is social and mobile was being born, and broadband was becoming more prevalent, and both search and e-commerce had scaled. Coming out of the Great Recession, two great companies, General Motors and Ford, paid back their loans and went back to business, and they thought they were restarting. What they missed was around then in 2009, 2010, because people's behaviors had changed and there were new technology capabilities, two little companies started then, one called Uber and one called Tesla. And you know what happened then. Similarly, two great companies, Schick and Procter & Gamble, went back to business as usual in the world of blades, and they added the third blade and the fourth blade and the fifth blade and the heated blade and the vibrating blade. And the blades had got so expensive, the razors got so expensive that you basically felt like a shoplifter when you went to Walgreens to buy anything because you had to get it unlocked, which you still have to do today. We're coming out of a Great Recession. People are basically thinking about value. You basically have YouTube, you have social networks. So somebody basically said, a couple of companies, we can do something very different. Why does someone have to go there and look like a shoplifter? Why does someone have to pay so much? So there came Harry's and Dollar Shave Club. Took 15 share points from Gillette. P&G had to, which is a fantastic company, had to write down last year $8 billion of its acquisition cost. So what I suggest to everybody is when we get back, we are not restarting, we're starting anew. Imagine that every business plan you wrote in December 29 is maybe obsolete. Maybe, not is obsolete, maybe, so revisit it. But very, very importantly, put only 3 constraints on what you're going to be doing, including what you all do. Constraint number 1 is whatever you have to do is legal. That sort of makes sense. Number 2 is whatever you do has to be technologically possible in 2021. And constraint number 3 is whatever you do has to break even or make money in 3 years or less. Outside of that, no rules. What would you do? And that, I believe, is what the Great Resurrection is going to be about once we get past the Great Resilience. I will end with one other thing, which is I'm going to send you one other piece, which is after I wrote that, people basically said, where are we now? And I wrote the piece that I just sent you, which also sort of indicated we were going to have social problems in April or May. This was before George Floyd. So what you're basically reading is April or May. 2 weeks ago, I wrote something called the Great Rewiring, which is what has basically happened. And I've basically showed how there are 6 places we usually spend our time in: the office, traveling, at home, restaurants and eating, etc. And how 5 of the 6 have all collapsed into the home right now. And travel is the only one, obviously, that hasn't collapsed, and what the implications are. But you can read that in that. And for those who are like any of this, I write a free newsletter, which I started not 5 months ago, but I started it 9 weeks ago, which just passed 3,300 subscribers, which includes, by the way, 38 CEOs of companies, which is fantastic, but lots of students too, which is even more fantastic. And I'll open up for questions. Thank you very much.
Hi, Rashid. Thank you so much. Rashad, thank you so much. That's an amazing early discussion, and I apologize. I thought it was 5 months, but it's actually 5 weeks. To gain 3,200 followers just speaks to the amount of folks that want to listen to hear you talk. So I've got one question so far. What do you think is the biggest reinvention opportunity for B2B service providers, i.e. for agencies. We've already been trending toward in-housing. Do you think this is still the case, or our new Gen 3 world?
I believe that the big opportunity is to be highly flexible and modular. What I basically mean is that you should be able to work like Lego pieces, connecting different pieces based on what the client needs versus basically selling the whole box of pieces.
Great. And we have a bunch of folks inside of the chat right now who are asking questions around the content that you already put up onto the chat. But I just want to make sure everybody knows that's why we do Slack and Zoom, so that our Slack networking channel, we're going to post up all of Rishad's content that he mentioned inside of the Slack channel, so all of our attendees can get access to that as well. So just so that you all know, so you're not worrying about the session's coming to an end and I'm going to miss out on all that great content. We're all going to push that into the network channel as well. So I've got another one around how do I consolidate and manage, Brandon asks, how do I consolidate and manage my virtual networking skills, and how does this play in the reinvention process?
So one of the key things is each one of y'all, regardless of the companies you'll work in, some of y'all will work in large companies, some of y'all work by yourself, some of y'all work in smaller clusters. Think about yourselves as companies of one. And that in effect, one of the big things in branding, one of the reasons I'm doing a lot of the stuff that I'm basically doing is I have become, by the way, a company of one. But in effect, your company or your individual persona, right, is basically what happens when someone Googles you. So the first page on Google, unless you're in China, then the first page on Baidu. But the first page on Google is what the world basically first gets introduced to you. Potentially, they also go to your LinkedIn, and then they go to your website. So to a great extent, optimizing the first page of Google or Bing or Apple search, Apple will launch a their own search engine in the next year or two. There's absolutely no doubt. I've already seen it coming. So one of those will basically be what you need to optimize on. And just at the risk of giving you all too much stuff, one of the things that were also very popular, I'm just going to quickly put it out, is someone basically said, what would you do today? So one of us, we should also remember, I don't play golf, but there's a thing in golf apparently called a mulligan, which is like a do-over. All of us happen to have the ability to basically have a mulligan. While it is not necessarily popular to say, it's unfortunate, but we are going to be spending the next 6 months sort of like we spent the last 6 months, pretty much there. And so people have basically sort of asked me, what should we do? So I've just texted in the chat, I've basically sent all of you all 6 thoughts for the next 6 months, including how to build a virtual brand and how to work in the virtual world, which is a question. People have sort of asked, I've noticed in the chat, where do you get what all the stuff that I'm basically sort of looking at? The easiest way, which is the portal to everything that is me, is basically rishadtobaccowala.com. There you'll find my blog, you'll find my newsletter, you'll find videos, you'll find everything else. And for those who are somewhat interested in a book that is doing relatively well, but as a starving author, every sale helps, you can go to your bookstore if they're open and look for my book, or you can just put in the name Rishad onto Amazon and my book will show up. I've optimized it for that. If you put in Rishad Tobaccowala book on Google, it will sort of show up, if that makes sense. And if none of that works, I've sent you a link, click and buy.
Rishad, just really quickly, I mean, because I know we talked about
Sure.
this when we first started discussing it. Your book launch really is a case study in the reinvention process. Can you touch a little bit on that and maybe give the example of that and how you had to pivot so quickly on that and the success that you've seen? It's a really good example of what I think you're trying to express to the audience.
Yes. So I launched my book on January 27th, and it was published globally by HarperCollins. And I was fortunate that I went down and met with my publisher and became friends with him. And so he allowed me to present to his sales force, because I realized how important sales force was. So I presented to his sales force, and they really pushed my book. And I got an amazing, all through February, I was featured in all the airports and all the bookstores. I got shelf space. That's the best way of saying. HarperCollins has special shelf space, and they featured me as one of the top 10 books that they had, even though I was the only new author. All of that went well, but then obviously March 12th comes, and I have three big problems occurring at the same time. The good news is my book's doing well. I managed to market it. It's going on for 6 weeks. March 12th comes, and I have three huge problems. One is bookstores closed, number one. Number two, events, which were basically I was speaking at all these events and they were buying my books. No events. Or if there are events, they are not charging anybody, so they've got no money, which is sort of the second. Third is Amazon basically believes books are not essential, and therefore they stop shipping books. And so all of a sudden I get myself in April and my sales basically completely plunge. And I'm sitting there and saying, now what do I do? And I obviously knew my publisher, so I said, okay, I would like to be a alpha or beta or whatever you call it, and let us try completely new ways of doing things. And what I basically did was I did the following four things. The first thing is I basically told everybody, hey, I'm willing to speak at any webinar you want at absolutely no cost. If you promote my book early on, I basically said, buy a lot of books. And they would basically sort of do that. The second is I launched courses for HR, because I began to realize that the only budgets that were not being cut were HR, because personnel and talent. So I basically created modules on how to manage change, how to lead with soul, how to upgrade your mental operating system, which is because people were sort of there. But then I also work with my publisher to make my book electronically available on the cloud, on any platform, in any country with the exception of Iran and China, because my book's coming out in China. They didn't want me to do that, but with the exception of Iran. But I eventually also got them to cut the price because the whole thing was in the cloud. And so we created links. So someone could basically buy individual links to send out to people, or a link with a certain amount of books already available, download, which they can use for lead generation. So now I have companies all over the world, and we reduced the price where the book, basically the electronic book, can be as low as $9 for 25 or $6 or less than $6 for 1,000. And so now I've got companies basically saying, this is fantastic. You can come and we can basically immediately give the book to everybody, and it's available in the cloud. And I made it device agnostic. You basically, as long as you have an Android or iOS or Mac OS or a Windows document, you could read my book. And sales just took completely off. So we completely changed everything, moved the pricing, changed a whole bunch of stuff. And I actually then, for the people who are my, I had 30 like CEOs and, marketing marks who were the people who recommended my book. So I sent them sort of a note that basically said, hey, 6 months later, I just want to tell you, how we're doing. And interestingly, and these were like 30 very senior people, 8 or 9 of them wrote back and said, what you just did, even though you've described it in a particular page, happens to basically be a case study on how one pivots in these strange and unusual sort of times. And what I'm going to do for you all is I'm going to send you right now in the chat in real time the Word document. I'll just send you a Dropbox link to the Word document that I sent them on what I did. All the different things that I did, including create ebooks. So I created, like the thing that you've just seen with the Great Reinvention, I created free ebooks as teasers. So I began to say, why don't I give the crack away for free, and then people will want the cocaine? Yeah. Okay, so things like that. So all these different, but I had to do this all in real time. So I did a combination of changing ways of marketing, reducing prices, changing audiences, and that further enhanced sales. But it was an adventure.
Amazing case study, and exactly what you're talking about in a reinvention.
So I just sent that to all of you all as also in the chat, which is the Dropbox stuff. Great. So you can see the note I sent to these 30 marketing bucks.
We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left. I've got a ton of questions. I want to try and get through some of them for you really quickly, but we're not going to get to them all. So hopefully, if you do have time, you could join us inside of the networking lounge. And
absolutely. Tina, can you just send me the Slack? I don't know. I've already signed up for the Slack channel. But just if you send me the link, I'll just go from here there when I'm supposed to go.
Okay, great. So one of the big questions that I have for you from the audience is, I fear that after this, it would be very easy to slip back into the mindset of that pushes back to normal versus better. How can we shape the minds of those who influence to ensure that folks don't slip back into the normal?
I believe there are 2 ways to do it. The first is, I think you'd be rather surprised about at least how a lot of senior people have been zoomed into the future. So often when I was basically asked, do certain people, senior management, et cetera, get it? They always did. But because of a combination of they've been forced to utilize all these technologies, and we've created this great experiment with everybody working at home and being forced to do new things, a lot of senior people have come into the future. It's I think that the thing not to get back to the norm, to what it used to be, is one is just to remind people continuously that, which is what I believe. I truly believe that the opportunities and the competitive threats to any business are no longer in the category that they're in. So just like I say, the future does not come from the future does not fit in the containers of the past. Another one I basically say is the future comes from the slime and not the heavens. So I spend a lot of time with crazy people. I'm one of the crazy people myself, and people that nobody talks to, right? So just to give you an idea, when I launched a little company called Giant Step in 1996, 1997, there were a couple of people who visited us, or one person who visited us, who no one wanted to see. His name was Sergey Brin, and he was going to start a company called Google, right? So one of the key things that I try to do is spend a lot of time with what I call people nobody pays attention to. So the future comes from the slime and not the heavens. Therefore, look outside your category. If you think about it, every threat to existing incumbents has come from outside their category. And I keep telling people, you are not behind your competitor, you are behind new customer behavior or people's behavior. That's what you're behind. You're not behind your competitor. Benchmarking against other pathetic people being slightly better than other pathetic people doesn't make you great, right? And this whole fixation on benchmarking against competitors is important, but oh my God, it is soul crushing. It doesn't take you into the future.
Wow. I'm writing down things as fast as I can. I'm so happy that we recorded this session. We've got one question left. We got 1 minute left. I'm going to ask the question, but I feel like we could talk for a half a day on this. What do you see the role of client procurement being when we come out of this, as many procurement have really engaged more with their C-suite during COVID?
So I believe that procurement is going to be along with, so that to me, there are 3 P's that are going to drive the future of companies, okay? The first one is people, which is the people who look after people and people themselves, which is number 1. The second P is to think very broadly about what your product is. Your product could be a service, but to reimagine your product or service. And the third is procurement. And why procurement? For a variety of reasons, but there are 4 reasons that I believe that are critical for the future of companies that procurement brings in. The first is you have to rethink your entire supply chain, including, by the way, your supply chain to customers and your supply chain to consumers. Procurement can help you do that. That's number 1. Number 2, you want to make sure that you have much more flexibility in your business. Procurement, working both with partners as well as with legal, can basically make sure that you have flexibility in your business. I've always believed that we don't know it yet, but all of us are Uber drivers, hopefully with better benefits. But if you sort of think about how consulting companies work, how a movie studio works with putting a movie together, it's just putting things together. So that's the second one, which is flexibility. The third one is value, which is people are going to be looking for both value and values. When I work with procurement, anybody good in procurement is focused on delivering value. Sometimes that comes through cost cutting, but that's not the only way. And not anybody good at procurement just looks at that as one factor, but value. But you also now have to think about values, because as companies change and as they try to basically become more socially aware, as I say, the new ESG is employees, society, and government. As we basically do that, procurement can help in a big part of that, which is very important. So obviously with partnerships, everything with value and values, everything with flexibility. And the fourth one, which is intensely important, is that procurement by its very nature can actually create totally different companies. If you are thinking about the rewiring of the future, who helps you rewire the future? Electricians and procurement people.
Yeah, absolutely. Rishad, thank you so much for your time today. This has been amazing. Unfortunately, we're out of time because I have to go open up. I have to go open up the other sessions, but I've got about 13 amazing quotes from that session. We got to go back and listen to it again.
Fantastic.
The book is amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for helping us with Q&A in the networking lounge.
Perfect.
And thank you for kicking off our event so well. We really, really appreciate it and look forward to listen. Join the blog. The man is amazing. So
thank you very much, Tina. You'll just send me the link in my email to get into the networking lounge, and I'll go there right now. So Tina, I'll wait for that.
I added him to the networking lounge.
Okay, so we added you to the networking lounge. If you go into Slack, you'll be able to get in there.
All right.
All right, everybody. So we're closing this session up. Go back to your interactive agendas. Take 5 or 10 minutes. Go get some coffee. Do a bio break, and then click into your interactive agendas and find the session you want for session number 1. Okay, breakout session number 1. All right. Bye bye.